Dr. Segal, let's start by asking you to introduce yourself and your field of study.
Sure. So, Dr. Nancy Segal, I'm a psychology professor. I've been here since 1991, and I teach classes in developmental psychology every semester. I sometimes teach a graduate seminar in twin research, which is my specialty. And to that end, I have founded and direct a twin study center here in the Department of Psychology. It's located on the fourth floor. It's jam-packed with videotapes and books and articles and all kinds of wonderful twin-related items.
Wonderful. And in this article, what question are you seeking to answer?
The question I'm trying to answer in this article is, many people have raised challenges in the event that human reproductive cloning would ever become a possibility. And so what I'm trying to say is you can address these challenges and probably weaken quite a few of them by looking at twin research, because twins are natural born clones. The reverse is not true. Clones are not twins for various reasons we can talk about. But twins are clones. And so we can look at the research findings, we can listen to their comments, and we realize that some of the challenges that have been raised are really not all that serious. Now, I'm not saying that if we can dismiss them, that means that human cloning should take place. We still have to evaluate its efficacy, its safety, all these sorts of things. But it's just that many of the roadblocks that have been put in place may not be as serious as many people anticipated.
Thank you. And how do you study this question?
The way you study this question is to look very carefully at the twin research findings. You want to see if twins experience any kind of diminished autonomy or social stigma as a result of being a clone. Mm-hmm. And to the extent that I have not found any evidence of that, that diminishes some of the challenges that have been raised. You also want to think about what human cloning might do to families. You know, what it would be like for a father raising, say, a clone of his wife, or a wife raising a clone of her husband. How might this impact human family relationships?
Before we dig deeper into your argument, let's get some definitions on the table. Let's start with clone, because you've mentioned that a couple of times. So what is a clone?
Yeah. So a clone is an organism that is genetically identical to another organism. And identical twins are clones because they result when a single fertilized egg divides between the first and 14th day after conception. They share all their genes. With very rare exception, they are of the same sex. We can talk about some of those exceptions, which are fascinating. And they're part of the same generation.
Are all twins clones?
No, only identical twins are clones. We also have fraternal or non-identical twins that have the same genetic relationship as ordinary siblings, which is half their genes on average by descent. Mm-hmm. And of course, same-sex twins who are fraternal come as two boys, two girls, or as one of each, and they are not clones.
So as you already mentioned, cloning is a controversial topic. And you start with the cloning of Dolly the lamb in 1997 and the anxiety it produced. So let's start there. Why are people so nervous about cloning?
I think people are nervous for a number of reasons. First of all, it's a new procedure. And I think whenever there are new procedures, they're scary at first until we understand their benefits and identify their possible difficulties. I think people forget that when in vitro fertilization was first introduced in the United States in 1981, people wondered what the consequences would be for families. And when it was actually developed in England in 1978, people wondered about the stigma that would be associated with Louise Brown, the first test tube baby. But these things have just not happened. Mm-hmm. So I think it's the newness of it. It's the unfamiliarity of it until we get used to it. I mean, IVF is a standard reproductive procedure right now. Nobody thinks twice about it. I also think that people have this kind of yuck reaction to the idea of a clone. And I think they worry that everybody's going to go out and do it. People talk about, I remember when cloning first came out in 1997, after the birth of Dolly in 1996, people talked about Michael Jordan clones. I mean, that they all wanted to clone Michael Jordan. The thing is that it's not a one-to-one correspondence. And the other thing is that what's valued in one generation may be very different than what's valued in another generation. So perhaps his sports skills were valued during the time that he lived, But if he had a clone of himself, maybe it's table tennis is the big deal, or ice skating. So things do change. What generation you're part of has a big impact on what's valued about you.
Yeah.
But we can also talk about some of the benefits. But why don't you ask the next question?
Yeah. Because I think that this is, just to state again what you're doing in your article. So you're saying, okay, there's anxiety about cloning. I'm a twin studies researcher. I can tell you a lot of things about twin clones, right? And some of those are similar to what we might see in other types of clones. And let's start with those similarities. What do we know about twins, particularly identical twins, that might help us feel more comfortable or uncomfortable with cloning?
Okay. So identical twins, as I said, share all their genes in common and they're the same sex. Now, identical twins are part of the same generation. So if they're walking down the street, they're immediately recognizable and they're the envy of many people. Many people are dying to be an identical twin because of the closeness and familiarity and acceptance and love that they share. We know from our research that identical twins have the closest social relationship there is. And so if they don't experience any identity problems, which they don't, most of them don't, if they don't experience any issues with diminished autonomy or with social stigma, and they're part of different generations, then it's hard to imagine how that would be a problem with people in different generations. So imagine that you as an adult are walking down the street holding the hand of your clone child. It is very unlikely that anybody would ever recognize you as the clone child donor parent pair. It's virtually impossible. I mean, if you look at yourself, for example, as a child, as an infant, as a preschooler, I mean, there's some resemblance there, but nobody would ever mistake you for a clone. So that's the kind of reasoning I try to bring into this conversation.
Yeah, because that's the major difference that you point to, right? Like, clones aren't necessarily living at the same time.
No,
So,
they are living at the same time, but they are not born at the same time.
Sorry, thanks for that. They might be inhabiting different generations.
Yes. And the reason why I argue that clones are not twins is because identical twins are conceived at the same time, which donors and clones are not. Identical twins share a womb, which donors and clones do not. Identical twins are delivered at the same time, which donors and clones are not. And identical twins are part of the same generation, which donors and clones are not. So it seems to me that generational separation is very key to dismissing or at least weakening some of these challenges that have been raised against it.
Yeah. And then to add to it, there's also the science of like sharing a uterine environment, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, what is very interesting about that is that with identical twins, so many people assume that sharing a womb makes you more alike, but actually the opposite is true. Because there are certain adverse effects that can happen and easily affect one twin, not the other. For example, sometimes the mutual circulation system sets up, so one twin literally bleeds into the other. This creates all kinds of difficulties. Now, and it also creates birth weight differences. So in fact, at birth, identical twins have larger birth weight differences than fraternal twins do. That eventually separates out. But with donors and clones, we don't know this yet. They might actually have more similar birth weights. And people have often asked me, who would be more similar, a clone or identical twins? And I have to say it's trait specific. I imagine it would vary from trait to trait. And also we don't know, we don't have the empirical data at this point.
Yeah. So where do we land at the end of the article? Like, so for folks who are anxious about cloning, should we be taking from your research that we should be anxious, we shouldn't be? Where do you weigh in on this?
My feeling is that we need to remember that all new medical technologies have been accompanied by fear and hesitation in the beginning. And I gave the example of in vitro fertilization. And I think if we keep that in mind, once we understand the benefits, we understand the difficulties, I think that would also apply to human cloning. Now, I suspect that human cloning will raise other issues that we've not even anticipated. But we need guidelines and controls in place to the extent that we're able to manage them. I think that once we get used to the idea, and another thing I want to mention is that even if the technology was shown to be safe and effective, I doubt most people would run out and do it. And the reason I say that is because we now have the methods to enable 70-year-old women to become pregnant with donated eggs.
Mm-hmm.
But so few women elect to do that. You just don't see it happening. So just because something is possible does not mean everyone's going to take advantage of it. So I think people are still going to want to have children the old-fashioned way or with some reproductive procedure if there are fertilization problems.
Mm-hmm. What might your peers find controversial about your research?
I think my peers will find it controversial because I'm more positively leaning towards human reproduction via cloning. I don't take a dim view at all. I think people should do what makes them comfortable and happy. And, if you think about it, what if you are the last survivor in your family line? What if you're a Holocaust survivor, a survivor of a war, something like that, or a natural disaster? Maybe you want your family line to continue. And that would be one, I think, very legitimate reason for doing human cloning. And the other thing is that I'm all in favor of adoption. I think adoption is a marvelous alternative to conceiving a biological child. But we have to recall that adoption has a risk. I mean, you don't know exactly what you're getting. And even people who do in vitro fertilization, there are all these books you can look at to get all the characteristics of the person, except for their name and address. But again, human reproduction is fickle, and it's kind of the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, and you don't know what you're going to end up with. So even with cloning, I mean, there can be cell replication errors, things like that. So I think that while adoption is a great alternative, and there have been many successful ones, I think that at least with cloning, you have a better sense of what you're getting yourself into.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. What future studies do you hope that this article will spark?
I just think it will stimulate conversations, particularly if human reproductive cloning is in the news again, and I suspect it will be. I would not be surprised if some scientists out there are quietly tinkering away in their laboratory. I mean, we don't know about it because federal regulations don't allow it, but I wouldn't be surprised if someone's out there doing it, and one day, out of the blue, just like with Dolly, we discover that, hey, a real human being has been cloned. So I think we need to be prepared for that, and I think we need to anticipate whatever we can in order to deal with this in a rational way.
So a human has not been cloned yet, right?
No,
Why?
a human has not been
Are there policies against it? Is it just, do you know why?
Federal regulations don't allow it now.
Okay.
And I don't think we have the technology for it. Remember that when Dolly was cloned, it took hundreds of attempts to get that successful lamb. So it's a long process. Human reproduction is complicated. On the other hand, we're all mammals just like Dolly. Mm-hmm. And it could be that those techniques are out there. I mean, again, we don't know what's happening in private laboratories around the country or around the world for that matter.
Yeah. What else are you working on right now?
So right now, I've just finished my 10th book, and it's off in the hands of Cambridge University Press. I don't have to think about it anymore. And that book is entitled Twinship, and the subtitle is What Twin Ties Reveal About Relationships. And I'm using twin research to understand who we like to work with, who we like to love, who we grieve for, who we like to have sex with, who we want to marry, all these kinds of questions. And I think twin research really informs those conversations. And then I have a contract now. I've begun a few chapters for a book called Twin Hunter, which is subtitled Grand Adventures in Twin Research. And that's my career narrative. And so I'm going to bring in my whole academic process, the great moments, the disappointments, the really hysterical moments that is very common in academia. And I'm also going to infuse it with research at critical junctures.
Oh, wonderful.
And I've got a whole list of studies going on in my Twin Studies Center on intelligence, on personality, on social relationships, all kinds of things, and all kinds of twins and other curious twin-like couples. So I keep my students busy, and there'll be 4 of them coming in tomorrow.
If there are any psych students in the audience, and they are interested in joining your lab, are you currently taking students?
I'm not taking students this semester or spring, but I will be taking students in the fall.
And people could just email you?
They can email me or they can come by and visit.
Wonderful. All right. Final question for me, and then we'll take 1 or 2 questions from the audience. A book, podcast, or movie that you recommend that folks watch? There
are actually 2. So the one movie I really recommend is Three Identical Strangers, which is about intentionally separated identical triplets who were separated because of the blind scientific ambitions of a psychiatric consultant to an adoption agency in New York and an investigator who had always wanted to study twins. But there's another movie related to that called The Twinning Reaction, which is actually a more scientific, less sensationalized version of that story. And I recommend that one as well. I think that you can get both online. A movie that two other movies I want to mention. One is called Accidental Twins, and that's based in large part on my book, Accidental Brothers, which is about doubly switched identical male twins in Colombia, South America. It was an amazing case where one twin in each pair was exchanged with another pair within the first week of life. They grew up thinking they were fraternal twins for 25 years until a case of mistaken identity revealed the difficult truth. So that my book was Accidental Brothers. The movie is Accidental Twins, but a movie that should be coming out very, very soon in this area is called The Last Twins. And these are the twin survivors of the Mengele experiments at Auschwitz-Birkenau in the 1940s. And there are some surviving twins. In 1985, I went down to Auschwitz-Birkenau with them to commemorate the 40th anniversary of their liberation. And I took tons of photographs when I was there, and I published that as a book. That book was used in part in the crafting of this movie. I've seen it. I have been a moderator with the producer over the summer. It's absolutely chilling and amazing.
Thank you so much. We have time for one audience question. If anybody has a question about twins or cloning, come on up.
Hi, I was curious on the lasting ethical implications of the Nuremberg study, and
Which study?
of the Peter B. or Neubauer, part of the Neubauer study, in your field as a whole, and then in contrast to that, what were some of the things that were able to be found within that study or permeated that have been a real benefit to your field as a whole?
Okay, great question. Peter Neubauer, for those of you who don't know, was the scientist on that 1960s twin study of intentionally separated twins, and he worked with the psychiatric consultant Viola Bernard. Right, so now, my field does not condone that study at all. We don't cite it. We don't mention it. It was completely unethical. Completely. You do not separate twins. You simply do not do that. And the kind of ironic twist to all this is that when the agency placed the twins, they purposely placed them in families that had an older sibling so the children would not be only children. I think of that and I can hardly believe what I'm hearing. Now, your second question was, what did we learn from the study? Okay, I hate to say it, but absolutely nothing. The data have been stored in the Yale University archives until 2065, not to be released until then. And the twins have even had quite a task at even getting their own data. They allowed researchers to write requests. I've done it twice. I've been denied both times. But I have been privy to a lot of the material because some of the twins have shared it with me. The data were gathered in a very sloppy, haphazard way. They're just sitting around. It's a disaster. And some of the families actually would have been pleased if the data were at least used after what they went through. Now, if you want some more information on that, I actually wrote a book on this called Deliberately Divided: Inside the Controversial Study of Twins and Triplets Adopted Apart. And that book is 500 pages, but it gives you the entire, every pair of twins, every attempt they had at publication. I mean, there are publications on it. They are reworked. It's the same pair and a different name. I mean, I've done all that looking around. But if you want to get the whole story on that book is definitive. And I remember my editor said 80,000 words. That was in the contract. I never pay attention to word counts. So I had to tally it up at the very end. I had 180,000 words. I'd basically written 2 books. And so she wanted me to start cutting chapters. And I said, look, this is never going to be done again. It's got to go as it is. And she went with it.
Wow. Thank you so much.
You're
welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Segal.